Hi everyone, it's Michael from Year 9. I'm going to do a video on freedom. I'm doing freedom because Craig asked me about it in Classical Liberalism and I didn't think we quite, well, there's no way we got across the breadth of the topic as we needed to. So I thought I'd put my thoughts down here. Maybe Craig can do one back. Freedom, there's no such thing as being free, the state of freedom. I don't think anyway. It's like wealth. You don't have wealth, you have a degree of wealth or an amount of wealth or education or health for that matter, right? So I think we confuse the words. There's something like the word autonomy that is not like everything that I do is entirely my own, like off my own free will, and that's impossible. I mean, like everything. If you've met a girl and you really like her and you marry her, and then you can't do anything that takes you away from her. If you have kids, even more so. As soon as you have kids, they're going to have a massive influence on your life, and you'll never be autonomous again. If you go out and live in a cave somewhere and eat dirt and say, right, I am beholden to absolutely none. Oh, look, and there's a volcano that pops up right next door. When you have to run away from the volcano, you don't get the choice. Maybe you get the choice to stay, but not many people would make it. So those sort of like nth degree discussions around autonomy, they are highly idealistic, and very few humans are really so free that they can say that that there is nothing that compels them to do anything, no outside force that is compelling you to choose one way or another. And we are all influenced by 10,000 thoughts and compulsions at any given moment. So there's no such thing as freedom, but we can pursue freedom to a degree. I guess the first thing we talk about is freedom of belief. And I just think you can believe anything you want, anywhere, anytime, given the experiences that you've had. If you're at the bottom of a deep dark hole and you're bound and gagged and chained and with a sack over your head, then you can still believe that you love your wife and you love your kids. They can't take that away from you. However, whatever they is, does seem to be able to put certain forces upon you or rob you of certain experiences to control your beliefs. I mean, this is true for absolutely everyone. The obvious thing to say is something like a lost tribe at the top of the Amazon has very few beliefs on Donald Trump or the ocean or physics. Well, they might have some on physics, but nothing like what we'd call physics. But does that make their life any less free? I mean, most people would say the guys at the top of the Amazon that we haven't discovered yet are really free. Like they don't pay taxes. So again, it's a tough discussion. Freedom. We're never going to believe everything all the time, literally because some beliefs are contrary to others. You can't believe 1 + 1 = 2 and 1 + 1 = 3. But given your experiences, you are going to have a finite set of beliefs that are available to you. As long as you're strong in your mind and you possess discipline and you have the will to believe whatever it is you want to believe, I don't see how, given the limitations, people can change your beliefs or can force you to. There's one possible exception to this, and that is limitations on the freedom of speech. If some government outlaws the speaking of the word love, can we stop people loving? Or if they outlaw the speaking of the word pleasure or passion or sex or some sort of passionate word, can we make people dispassionate just by controlling the speech? And the final manifestation, I think, of this, if you outlaw conversation, if dialogue is made illegal for whatever reasons, or you can't gather in groups of more than 3 or 4 people or something like that, am I ever going to know what I believe if I don't speak it out loud like I'm speaking to you all now? And hopefully some people might dialogue back, and then through dialogue I might form my beliefs into something more than scattery fragments of words and sentences into a meaningful construction of the expression of my own belief. But yes, so having said that, we probably can control beliefs, can't we? If we control people talking, if we control people meeting. And so this all comes back to free speech. People act as though free speech is like a weapon to be deployed against Hitler, and if Jordan Peterson just debated Hitler in 1932, we'd all be safe. No, probably not. I doubt Hitler ever debated in his life. But freedom of speech when we're 2 and 3 and 4 years old, and then as we grow into mature adults, if we can always guarantee that people are going to speak to each other regularly, people from different backgrounds, people older than them especially, and listen, then perhaps our beliefs that are fragmented and heavily biased in our head can become constructive social beliefs that actually work in society. This, of course, leads us on to freedom of expression. And I'm going to quote John Stuart Mills here because I should have said at the beginning, anyone that wants to know about freedom, read On Liberty by John Stuart Mills. Still is the book on it. And then you should probably read after that the Answer for Handbook, the last chapter there. They seem to make arguments against freedom of speech. I'm definitely going to do a video on that. But I want to read John Stuart Mills here on freedom of expression. If all mankind minus one were of one opinion, and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. The peculiar evil of silencing the expression of an opinion is that it is robbing the human race still more than those who hold it. If the opinion is right, they are deprived of the opportunity of exchanging error for truth. If wrong, they lose what is almost as great a benefit, the clearer perception and livelier impression of truth produced by its collusion with error. Yeah, it's a mouthful, and he uses more commas than he does full stops, but John Stuart Mills is awesome. You should find out about that guy for sure. He's like the classical liberal. So freedom of expression, John Stuart Mills would have us believe that we should be able to say just about anything we want. I think he said something like, the modern day version is you can't run into a theatre and yell fire. He said something like you can't hand out placards saying kill Whitey or something to a whole bunch of protesters or things like that. He did believe freedom of speech had its limitations, but if two people dialogue and someone's opinion is just so offensive, we should hear it. And then we can explain to this person why they're wrong, and if they're so pig-headed they won't listen, we can at least sit down and say, right, now we have literally heard every opinion on the matter, and we are still convinced that the thing that we believed initially was right, or in a very rare occasion that pig-headed person is right. We can exchange truth for error. And don't think it doesn't happen, because Newton and Galileo and Copernicus and guys like Jesus Christ were all the pig-headed person at some point in time, and we did exchange error for truth at some point. But realistically, freedom of expression is good because when you run around in the world and try and live your life and have nice things, you're going to have to fight for those nice things, and you're going to have to fight hard. And to fight hard, you should be convinced of the righteousness of your actions. And some people think you get convinced by shutting yourself in, and you gain conviction by not listening to anything else. So you have only one opinion. So therefore, 100% of your belief is based on one singular opinion, so therefore you fight hard. But that's rubbish. Eventually you come across someone that says something and you falter, as Kathy Newman faltered against Jordan Peterson. If, however, you've heard every opinion there is, weighed them all up, and believe that there is nothing out there that you haven't heard, that's the ultimate form of conviction. You know that there's nothing that is going to trip you up because you've seen everything that would attempt to trip you, and you've negotiated that. So certainly people should listen to all opinions, we should read all things, we should speak to all different sorts of people, and we should accept that the best way to live is with conviction, and conviction comes from listening to the diversity of opinions. So the thing that limits freedom is harm. I'm not free to rush out and harm someone for harm's sake. Doctor tries to treat someone and it doesn't go so well, and the patient passes away under treatment, not necessarily harm. We can put someone in prison because we have to keep them away from society. Not necessarily harm for harm's sake, I should be saying. Something like I find someone that's not breathing and their heart's not beating on the beach and perform CPR and save their life, but break 3 or 4 ribs in the process, or something like that. I have the flu, and in doing mouth to mouth, I give the other person the flu. Then I'm not necessarily doing harm, but you might argue that I am. So the harm principles, just I'm convinced it's impossible. If someone else smarter than me can do it. But you shouldn't act when you harm someone else for harm's sake. How do we prove intent? Bugger if I know. The other hard bit about harm is what's the difference between harm and mere offence, as John Stuart Mills would say. If one person says, oh, if you call me a bad name, that's harm and you must be arrested. And person B says, hey, you can call me all the bad names in the world, sticks and stones might break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Presumably person A will grow up something like a snowflake, or fragile, or crying to the police, or requiring state involvement, or church, or community involvement at the slightest, merest offence that ever happens. And more than that, person A will benefit from a system that rewards them upon labeling more and more and more things offensive. When your wife cooks a bad meal, that's offensive. She shouldn't be able to do it. When some guy cuts you off on the freeway, that's offensive. He shouldn't be able to do it. When your boss doesn't give you a pay rise, that's offensive. He shouldn't be able to do it. Maybe the guy should learn to cook for himself. Maybe the guy should be more patient on the freeway. And maybe the guy should work harder at work. But if you complete to offense, then all your obstacles get removed from in front of you, and you'll never learn to jump obstacles. But the person B that thinks, no, nothing can hurt me, grows a thick skin and grows good at solving his own problems and overcoming his or her own obstacles. I think I'm right in saying this, that John Stuart Mill said don't do harm, but I suspect that he might have been wrong on that, and that perhaps he should have said something like minimize the harm that you do. And so if in the world that we live in right now, let's get all panicky and conspiratorial about this and say this straight white male goes on Twitter and says anything at all, everyone will destroy me because because feminism hates me and things like that. Let's say that really worked, and everything that I ever said because of my privilege was offensive, then I should say nothing at all. But surely then if I leave society and go away and literally live in my cave and eat dirt, I must definitely be robbing the world of another worker, another husband, another father, another whatever it is that I am. Removing yourself from the world so as to never do harm, and thus keeping John Stuart Mill's happy that no harm is ever done, is surely robbing the world of the benefit of me, whatever that may be. It must be something like minimize the harm that you do or rationalize the harm that you do. Like if we said never do harm, then doctors would never practice, right? Like inevitably a doctor makes a mistake or misdiagnoses, or the illness is way too hard to diagnose in the first place. Never do harm, then every politician that ever made a law, or like remember when the GST came in, Natasha Stotspoya vetoed having a GST on everything, and she made a list of things that must be GST free, and she forgot to put female hygiene products on there. And everyone's brought that up pretty much every 12 months since for the last 18 years that there should be female hygiene products GST free. She made a mistake. Like, what do you want? There to be GST on water? There to be GST on medicine? I mean, she tried her best. She missed something off. She minimized the harm that she did. People argue that she did harm. Man, I don't know. So I think minimize the harm that you should do is probably better. The other thing I would say about harm is that it's got to be predictable. When you do harm by accident, that's pretty hard to avoid by definition of it being an accident. The classic example is you might walk over and ask a person out on Monday and then walk over and ask a person out on Tuesday. And the persons on Monday and Tuesday look the same, but the one on Monday really liked the fact that you asked them out and gave them your number. The person on Tuesday screamed and said, you shouldn't have done that, you've offended me. And how can you know? Like, life's not a life is a guessing game, but judgments of morality shouldn't be you guessed wrong. We either shouldn't be guessing, or there should be some clarity around the outcome of the guess, some predictability. So after we've discussed harm, maybe we can go back and discuss expression again. Specifically at present, there's a lot of people out there saying that freedom of speech is bad and we shouldn't be able to speak as freely as we'd like. And I've already discussed that you exchange error for truth and you gain conviction. I think some people think that the speech that is a command, that a person must command another. If there's a person in a position of power and I have the freedom of speech to say something terrible, or Oompa Loompas must be taxed at 70% or something like that, and my speech becomes a command, then that's harmful to Oompa Loompas. But why would people agree with me? Why would people rush out and find every Oompa Loompa on the face of the earth and tax them at 70%? It implies that my words have power, and reasonable words have power. 1 + 1 = 2 has power. Feed starving people, that statement has power. Be nice to your kids, raise them well, raise good children, surely that has power. I have no problem with that command having power. Why? Because it appeals to something. Appeals to reason, appeals to divine command, appeals to popularist panicky mobs. Yes, okay, so the idea that words as a command might do harm, and I still don't think that the answer is to limit free speech, because that limits our ability to think and limits, and it can be abused by powerful people. But I think the answer would be the other way around. Like if you said something, all Oompa Loompas must be taxed at 70%. The answer would be to educate the population. So they should say, A, 70% is huge, and B, damn, Oompa Loompas don't exist. And even if they did, what did they do wrong? And I think the idea is to educate. And the people that have lost faith in freedom of speech, it's really condescending, because they seem to think, and they're all uni students, right? They seem to think that, oh, the population's so dumb. Like people like my parents or something like that are too stupid and would be swindled. Man, my parents are smart. They can think their way through these things. Most people are. My grandmother's 95. You can't swindle her yet. It seems condescending, this idea that the populace is too dumb, and everyone that voted for Trump is just an idiot. Maybe people were concerned with economics or something, and that's why they voted for Trump. So definitely freedom of speech is a good thing, and having learned now what harm is, and that words as a command might cause harm, still doesn't make me think that freedom of speech is a bad thing. But maybe we should pay some mind to making sure that people are considerate of reason and listen well. So the last thing to discuss before it starts getting really hard is, okay, so freedom from what? Freedom from the government making laws, right? The man coming and putting a hobnail boot down on me or something like that. Freedom from tyranny and freedom from the military control or something like that. But really the big thing these days is freedom from traditions, freedom from customs, and freedoms from fashions, right? And those are the things that, there's nothing stopping me grabbing my phone right now and tweeting blah, 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 something far right, or blah, 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 something far left, or da, 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 something really old-fashioned. But it's the Twitterati and the blue tick brigade on Twitter are going to target me or dox me or something. And that's got nothing to do with the government. It's got nothing to do with the military. That's just something like social pressure or something like this. And I think the really big thing for people today is, how do you deal with that? Like, I got to raise kids. How am I going to teach them how to deal with it? That one's tough. Do you go on your phone less and then you learn less about the world? That might be a good thing, to be completely honest. You care less about what other people say. Yeah, the doctor says you've got to stay out of the sun more and put more sun cream on because that mole's looking suspicious. You should probably care about that opinion. So we're really bound by the tyranny of traditions, fashions, and societies right now. Some traditions need to be broken, and we've forgotten why some customs are good, so we abandon them, but they can be good. I think one of the tricks to solving this is we often ask, what should a person like me do? And there's a ready-made narrative. Oh, a man, you should be a feminist and you should put women on a pedestal. And then someone else says, no, a man, you should go down a coal mine and get big muscles and go to war. And maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the question is, what makes me happy? And the Greeks wrote around the top of the Oracle of Delphi, right? Like, know yourself and you'll know the gods of the universe and all the secrets, or something like that. And so if I find out what makes me happy, then perhaps, rather than saying, what should I do? And some social leader jumps in and starts pushing me in one direction and not another. Perhaps what makes me happy? So I should go out and play football, right? And football makes me happy. But I never tried ballet, and I never tried ballet because of social pressure, right? Because guys really didn't do that sort of thing. But hey, maybe that made me happy. I listened to a lot of heavy metal music. I didn't listen to hip hop because, I don't know, in the 90s it was considered like overly American or something like that. But maybe we should try a whole bunch of new things and make us happy, and even if it's taboo, try it and see what it is. And that's a good way of fighting against traditions, customs, and fashions. I think this leads on to an obvious discussion for the moment: freedom from like elites or globalization or the media or something like that. Like, seriously, man, Google algorithm. Like, my wife Googles something and then I start getting adverts for it 3 seconds later, and we're not even in the same suburb. They're coming at me from all angles. And I think this is going to be the big thing that we need to free ourselves from going forward. I just can't find a media outlet that is trustworthy. It all seems to be playing an angle. The Australian's far right, the Guardian's far, well, I retract. The Australian is right, the Guardian is left. What's century? I mean, like, 9msn.com just seems to appeal to like female fashion, and anyway. Finally, we come now to freedom of action, which is the big one, right? Like, what can you go out into society and actually do? I mean, you obviously can't throw a rock into a crowd of people, but freedom of personal action is where the rubber hits the road here. So the classic one right now is that some people born men want to call themselves women, and I have zero issue with that so long as it's in good faith and they're not just ducking out or making welfare repayments or something like that guy that wanted to be an 8-year-old girl and he had a family to support. But what if, like during a time of war, and we need every able-bodied man to go and fight, I let myself become drug addict or alcoholic or overweight or something? Should society step in? What if I'm going nowhere? What if I have absolutely nothing going for me? I've never had a job. I've never educated myself. Should society step in? If I become like a big shut-in and the forklift needs to take me out of my bed, should society step in then? Obviously, society should step in if I start firing a gun in the street. But when should society step in and control me? I'm not saying necessarily the government, police arresting me because of the uni degree I'm getting is not good enough, but your friends or your family or these social pressures that I was talking about, traditions, customs, and fashions. Is there a point in time where they should just start saying, mate, you've got a HEX debt that's approaching warp speed and you're never going to pay it off, and the next thing you're getting is like a PhD in arts? Dude, you've got to get a job or something like that. And society wants to push you and change you all the time to make you a better person. But what the hell's a better person? Like, the church has their opinion on what a better person is. Marxists have their opinion on what a better person is, which is right. And that's just such a huge conversation. But I think that we can take it down a level before we get there. I think that we can use an analogy, say like someone that makes a great work, like an artist who's chiseling David out of a big block of marble. If a person petitions Michelangelo to chisel David, and then halfway through he comes back and says, "Nah, I changed my mind. Can you do Smurfette?" And then changes their mind a bit later. Actually, can you do Homer Simpson? I mean, the statue's going to turn out terribly. You've got to give the artist, or perhaps the craftsman that's building the house, or the carpenter that's making a table, you've got to give them the chance to make the piece of work from beginning to end. Otherwise, they'll never make a good piece of work. I think this is similar with legislation in Parliament. People want to simply change it halfway through and amend this and amend that. Perhaps we should have put a bit of thought into it beforehand, because it's often quite necessary that something has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's one mind that's controlling the whole thing, so there's some sort of fluency or some sort of consistency. And a really good example of that is young men right now. Like, maybe young women too. I've never been a woman, so I couldn't tell you about that, but certainly with young men, I'm not quite 40 yet, but in the 90s, what they were telling us is so different from what they're telling young guys today. In the 90s, they were saying something like, if you go out into the club and you meet some girl and she's hurricane drunk and she's in full flight and she wants to go home with you, then they're saying that's good, that's her agency and that's her liberating. But these days, it's different, right? These days, if you go home with a girl that's drunk, it sounds as though, I mean, I wouldn't really know, I've been out of the game a long time, but it sounds as though that's this huge offense and you go to prison for that. And literally, it could be a prison sentence for doing that sort of thing. I don't know how we raise men in a society that expects them to do the first thing that I said, but also the second thing I said. The two things are definitely contradictory, and guys have to try and live up to both expectations at the same time. Some people are saying what's good is to go out and be capitalist and to save your money and to invest it and to get a return. Some people are saying what's good is to be Marxist and you give your money away, and if you're white and you have a rental property, you give it away to someone that's not white, or something that they're saying in America. I don't see how we can raise men in these sorts of situations, and I think that the answer is that we need to give them the freedom not to do anything, but the freedom to do one thing. So how do we choose one thing that they should do? And the answer is just to have a small community. Like, you're not going to get the huge big pressures, like the pressure from here that contradicts the pressure from here within a small community. You get that from the globe, right? You get that. We're receiving information from California and New York and pressures out of Tokyo and London, and here I am living in Perth. Like, it's a ridiculously large environment to receiving different pressures from. So I certainly think that the idea of freedom can be freedom from bullshit, like freedom from these crazy pressures on you all the time, from someone you've never met, but they're a celebrity whose last name is Kardashian, and now that has to affect you. We've got to stop putting uh, lots and lots of different pressures on young people from lots and lots of different angles, and give them the freedom to just be themselves. Otherwise, like Michelangelo, they'll never carve David. So there's this movement in the world that we must never offend anyone ever. But if we make 100,000 laws, the simplest would be the Jordan Peterson thing about the pronouns, that you must use these words and never these words. If there are too many pressures on young people, too many rules, too many uh, restrictions on their freedom, we just won't produce adults. We'll produce, like these news readers that are so good at speaking on TV for like an 8 hour period, and they never say anything controversial. And they use, or athletes, when you interview an athlete at the end of a football game, and they'll say, disappointed with the loss, but a week's a long time in football. We're just eager to get the 4 points. The coach did a good job. I support my teammates. It's not about me. And it's crap. They don't say one word of truth. They're just rolling out isms. They're just rolling out things that they can, like old-fashioned, tried and tested methods of getting through the interview. It adds nothing. And we're very good at producing people like that right now. But are we still producing people? Like, you know, that guy on the microphone has an opinion, but you won't hear it. Are they still people? Are they still, can they lead? Can they raise children if, when raising their children, they're just trying not to offend? I don't think that's how we raise kids, is it? So I think this leads to the big insight that I had into freedom a few years back. I want to read it. People ask, how much freedom do I have to be myself? But they are wrong to ask this. The real question must be, why should society let me be myself? And when the answer is because as yourself you serve your tribe well, you will find that your actions are rarely limited and that you are happiest. The answer will lead to the next question. Which tribe will I serve best and thus be left to be my true self? Finding this tribe is a big part of life and a key aspect in making freedom make sense. Freedom will forever seem absurd if your tribe is forever censoring your every action. Your tribe will forever be doing this to you if your actions make the tribe weak, and you will find yourself limited at every action. You must either change your actions or change your tribe. And so I think that the answer that makes freedom of action make sense is that, yeah, if you're living in a situation where every single time you open your mouth, everyone tells you to shut it because you're being offensive, you got to get out of that community. I mean, you're not going to live, you're not going to develop into an adult that way. Go find a community where when you live, and hopefully morally and justly, but when you live, people say, yep, that's fine, fair play, play on, no harm, no foul, on you go. And you'll be a much happier person, then freedom will make sense. And then, like Michelangelo, you can finish David. But right now, like, especially if you're on social media, everything you say is offensive, and you have to apologize all the time, you're never going to get anywhere. So I think a good analogy to illustrate this example is think of, I won't say water, think of H2O. Sometimes it's ice, sometimes it's water, sometimes it's steam. It's very, very useful to us as water, extremely useful in fact. Pretty useful to us as steam as well. The steam engine was alright, and pretty useful to us as ice. But three manifestations of H2O are especially useful to us because we know the state that they'll be under predictable conditions. So if you want ice, keep it below 0 degrees centigrade. If you want steam, keep it above, well, very high, 100 degrees centigrade, and mostly you'll get steam. But anywhere in between that, you'll have water, and then we have a difference between hot water and cold water. At 36 degrees, you can put a baby in the bath. Anything too cold or too hot for that is bad for it. So predictable conditions. And I think human beings can be like that as well. And I'm finding this about myself. When I go to university, for example, I need to put left-wing microchip into my brain and use certain different words from when I go to a different environment. And certainly when I go to work, I take all political chips out and just become this drone. And it's different from when I get home with my wife and kids as well. I have a different version of me that's there as well. And when I think you can manage that, but when you're expected to act one way in an environment where you thought you would have to act another way, that's when it becomes hard. For example, if water turned into steam randomly, you'd never be able to drink. Like, you'd never be able to contain water in a jug. It's the change of state that makes it unmanageable. And that's with social media, with this phone, this Trojan horse that's in our pocket all the time. Freedom is becoming hard because this left wing or this right wing or this religious or this feminist or this work or this family opinion can just ding ding its way into your life at any point in time. And I think a lot of the problems are coming from there. And we would do better if we would compartmentalize our lives, or at least just live simpler lives. Again, small community, small group of friends. Like, resist globalism and don't try and make the globe like a global village. It's terrible. A global village. Ugh. So it would appear that if a tribe, seems to be the words that I was using, could produce like a homogenous set of values, then it would be simple to live in it, and you could go and like check out all the tribes and find the one whose values agreed with yours. And then if you're living in a group of people where you all share the same values, I mean, obviously you're going to get on better. Problem being that if you have multiple tribes with very different values, then you end up in a war, don't you? We got nuclear weapons these days, which is hard. I'm not saying I've got the answer to that, but the discussion is freedom. And freedom within a tribe of people with homogenous values makes more sense than freedom within a group where you don't belong. And when I say don't belong, I mean you were born into this thing, or you found yourself there somehow, and you have a lot of conflict with other people all the time. So this leads us to like the last part of freedom, I think. So we're just dealing with freedom as an individual. How can you be on your own, like autonomous as best you can be? And I've said that that freedom of speech is good because you act with conviction. Freedom of belief, I mean, you're just going to believe what you're going to believe. I don't see how you can control that unless you can control experiences. Then you speak, and so your beliefs make some sort of sense because you've spoken to other people. You try and minimize the harm you do. Whether or not you can do no harm is another thing altogether. We accept that the big limitations on our freedom at the moment come from traditions, customs, and fashions, and elites, and the media, and that's where we're really being limited in our freedoms. And freedom makes the most sense when once you have your beliefs because of free speech and you've learned to challenge traditions, customs, and norms. If you find that you're having to challenge them all the time and getting reprimanded on being offensive all the time, change tribes. Go looking for a tribe that reprimands you less and less. Does seem to be the way to make freedom work. I'm not saying that's necessarily the moral thing to do, but it does seem to make freedom work. But you can't be an individual forever. Like, you're not going to be like a petulant teenager for the rest of your life doing whatever it is that you want to do. Like, God, Dad, and you run home and slam your bedroom door with a keep out sign, the skull and crossbones on the front, and play PlayStation on your own. Like, you can't be like that for the rest of your life. You're going to have to play nice with your tribe. And so the first thing you need to do is you need to be something like a useful person. And if we create like Dudley from Harry Potter, I mean, he was useless. He was a big bully, but his mum raised him like a spoiled brat. He couldn't do things for himself. He couldn't control his own weight or control his own aggression. And so we're going to have to allow men and women, I'll focus specifically on men though because I know more about that, the freedom to construct a useful, helpful person. The old expression, catch a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach him to fish and he'll eat forever, then teach him to fish. We need, firstly, strong people that can fend for themselves. If they can fend for themselves, then perhaps in time they can fend for the tribe, or at least a part of the tribe themselves, and thus be useful. Thus the tribe will accept them. Thus freedom will make sense to them within their tribe. So this requires a tribe having some patience with the guy, you know, like not kicking him in the guts when he's down, helping him when he's down, helping him up, and we might construct a strong person if we don't just have at them when they're weak. The flip side of that is if a person's acting in bad faith and they're not trying to get anywhere, yeah, it might become a point in time for the tribe to expel them and think you're just never going to help. And a really good example of this is how do we turn a boy into a man? If we expect something, if there's a burden of performance on men, and I suppose women too, but again, I'm going to talk about men, we're going to take this thing that's like a teeny tiny little baby in a cot and turn it into a man, something like me. How do we do that? Well, we take 18 years to do it. And the boy should live in the community for 18 years and should keep his eyes and ears open and learn and find out what's expected for him. But that requires like a singular expectation. If in the 18-year period, what's expected of a man changes too many times, a man's expected to be a Christian. No, he's expected to be atheist. No, he's expected to be a feminist. No, male feminists are all creepy and sleazy and sneaky. We expect him to be centrist. No, centrists don't have any spine. We expect him to be right. No, the right are scary. You're not going to raise a boy that way. You're going to have to come down to a simple, singular expectation on young men. So is that enough? If we take boys and say, here's what is expected of you now, and it's simple and they can understand it, and it is fairly singular. No, I don't think it's enough. There's one more thing. The boy has to love their tribe. It has to want to fight for them. It has to want to take his shield and stand in the shield wall and protect, just put himself between the society or his tribe and harm's way. If he doesn't love his tribe, then he won't stand in its way, and that requires a theory of justice. People love a just society. People love a fair society. People love a righteous society. And so your tribe must be just, fair, and righteous. Otherwise, you can raise the boy all you want. If he doesn't love the tribe, he won't hang around. So I think like a really good example of an area where we're failing to raise boys into man because there are multiple expectations on them and they find they don't love their society at the end of it is something like the culture wars at the moment, or perhaps the gender wars at the moment is an even better example. Some group of people like feminism that set out to make women's lives better, which is totally admirable and no one has any real issue with that, suddenly starts, and when they're like 22, 23, 24 and things, start putting a big fat finger in young men's eyes and saying, you're wrong, you're terrible, and you start driving the media, which you don't get a fair trial in, towards maybe a singular man in particular, an individual that has a name, or just men as a whole. It does become lynch mobby, and it is ill-considered, and there isn't a great deal of authority in a 23-year-old female in telling a 30-year-old male how he should act as a man. And so I think we've got a ton of guys right now that just don't really know. Freedom doesn't make sense to them. When they walk out their front door and live freely, they seem to get conflicting versions of how they should live and what a good man is. And I think they get everything they do is considered to be offense. Maybe because they genuinely are offensive, which they should consider stopping, but also maybe because people just need to virtue signal. People just need to say, for me to be a victim, I need an attacker. And obviously you're going to choose a straight white male to be that attacker. It's the best fit. And so we have this phenomenon, which I think we're seeing, of this tribalism among men, reverting back to the Red Pill communities and the MGTOW communities and the MRA communities, where there's just other men, small communities. And quite frankly, I think that's pretty good. Like, I think that's smart for the guys to do that. You are going to surround yourself with guys that have a homogenous value. You're not going to be told you're offensive every second of the day. And feminism isn't, metaphorically, hasn't painted the room a shocking shade of pink, which is going to be unsettling, and you're going to find out that you don't love your tribe. If you don't love your tribe, you don't serve it. And guys should serve their tribe. And so I kind of agree with this. It sounds like I should use the word regression, but it might even be progression into small communities and local homogenous tribes, which seems to be the right thing to do. It's making freedom make sense, and everyone wants freedom. So in summary, we talk of freedom all the time. It's a really hard word to define. Freedom of thought, yeah, that seems, so long as you can speak about it, that seems something that we can do. It's obviously restricted by the experiences you had, but that's the same for everyone. It doesn't really matter. The big oppressors right now are traditions, customs, and fashions, and there's the pressure on us all the time to never offend anyone's tradition, never offend anyone's custom, never offend anyone's fashion is impossible, and the reversion to smaller, more manageable tribes is inevitable. I don't know. Maybe it affects men and women together. It certainly seems to me to affect men, but perhaps it affects us all. I don't know. I can't answer that question. But they're my thoughts on freedom. Really love you to leave a comment and make a video back or get in touch somehow because, hey, it's just my opinion. And as I said, my own jump of thoughts flying forward out of my face hole doesn't necessarily mean that they're cognitive. It requires dialogue to do that. So like and comment and subscribe and all that sort of stuff. See you guys. Michael from Vienna signing out.